Well, hello, and welcome to this webinar, which is about 5 steps to a more abundant edible garden. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm really excited to share some amazing tips with you, and that have all helped me grow a more abundant edible garden with more joy and more ease. So I started off very hit and miss. I didn't know anything about growing 15 years ago, and I was just like randomly doing things without a plan. And then when I learned permaculture design, and I also really looked into ecological gardening and growing in harmony with nature, it really changed everything in my growing. It really gave me designing systems that really worked for me, and designs that meant that everything was just so much easier. So a little bit of work put in now to learn the foundations can mean that you can save loads of time in the future. So I really hope that these tips are going to be helpful for you. So I'm just going to start my presentation now. So I just wanted to mention as well, I mean, you're interested in edible growing, so you're probably aware of the benefits of growing your own food, but some of the benefits that I've experienced are just having access to that fresh, nutritious food right in your garden or on an allotment or something like that. You can't buy the freshness and the nutrition that you get from those foods. Those are living foods. You literally cannot buy that in any shop. And the satisfaction that you get, and the mental well-being and the health that you get from putting your hands in the soil and from being in contact with nature, is also very healing. Not to say anything of the benefits for the environment, obviously the reduction of food miles and an increase of food security, which in these times it's great to say that you might not be self-sufficient in food, but you have some food available if the supermarket shelves are there, like they have been during the lockdown, for example. So there are so many benefits. And growing, gardening also helps you live longer. So out of the people that they've looked at in the blue zone, so people who live to being above 100 years, it's a really high percentage of them, like over 80 or 90%, that are gardeners, and they garden every day and grow food. So yeah, it can really help you live longer. So with all that said, I'm going to start my presentation. Okay. So, as I said, I'm going to give you 5 steps. Some of these you'll be able to implement straight away. Some of them might take a bit longer. We've only got 45 minutes, so some of them are going to be in not too much detail. So number one of the most important things for growing, and this took me quite a long time to realize, something that I definitely wasn't doing when I was starting out on my growing journey, is growing an abundant mindset. Like anything in life, mindset is the foundation of everything that we do. And if we go into anything with the right mindset, then we've got so much more chance of success than we do otherwise. This has really been clear to me. So this year I've been talking to a lot of people and doing online interviews with people about their gardens, and a lot of people are kind of feeling a bit negative about their spaces. They're focusing on the things that are not working, and saying, oh, the slugs ate this, or this didn't grow, and I'm feeling a bit of a failure because of that. And then when I've actually looked at their spaces, I'm like, well, hang on a second, what have you grown? You know, you have this amazing fig tree, or you have these amazing herbs that you can pick every day, or you're growing this salad, and these things are working. And so what I really try and do is focus on what's working in your garden, and be thankful and use gratitude to say thank you every single time that you harvest something, because what you focus on grows. And if we focus on the negative all the time, then that's what grows. So we need to focus on the positive. And I've definitely experienced this in my own life. It's a work in progress for me, but it's giving me massive benefits to focus on the things that are working in my garden. So I say thank you all of the time. Every time I look at my garden or think about it, I try and say thank you to the plants. And I think that's such a good practice. It doesn't take long, but it really makes you appreciate everything that you do have. So another thing that I do is I tune into my garden. So when I'm gardening, I think I use logic and intuition in equal measures. So in order to tune in, I've got a simple visualization that I'm going to do with you now. So if you're busy doing something else, if you can just take a couple of minutes just to stand or sit and just focus on this. This will be really important. So standing or sitting, you just take a couple of deep breaths. And just imagine that you're in your garden. And if you like, you can imagine that it's a lovely sunny day. And just feel the warm sun on your skin. And if you like, open up your palms towards the sun. So you're really feeling it and welcoming it in. That beautiful, warm, glowing light. That lovely warm sun that gives us all life. It makes all of our lives and our plants' lives possible. So feel the sun coming in down your head and feeling it fill up your whole body so that you're just a light, you're glowing with warmth and sunshine. Right down to your feet. And then I'd like you to imagine that there are roots growing out of the bottom of your feet. So really feel where your feet are in contact with the ground. Maybe you're maybe you've got bare feet. And really feel those roots going deep down into the ground, growing down, 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 and spreading out all over your garden. And spreading out into the whole earth. Because we're part of nature, we're connected to everything. We're not separate. So get really grounded in this space. And now I'd like you to breathe in. And as you breathe in the oxygen that your plants are giving you. It's like a gift from the plants in our lives. Breathing in the oxygen that they provide us with, and then breathing out, we give them a gift back, which is the carbon dioxide that we give to them. So breathing in the oxygen from your plants and breathing out the carbon dioxide. So we're receiving a gift and we're giving something back. Receiving as we breathe in and giving something back. And that's something that you can do whenever you go into your garden, or even if you're not in your garden, just to connect to your garden and connect on an intuitive level and really start listening to the plants. That will bring you in a more abundant garden. So one more thing on mindset that I'd like to suggest that you do is be really clear on your whys. So why do you want an edible garden? There's loads of benefits. I mentioned some of them before. There's a list that I've got here up on the screen. Hopefully you can see that. There's loads of different benefits to do with the food, saving money, food security, educational space, play space, wildlife benefits, your own well-being. So you might be doing it for all of these reasons, but if you take a pen and paper now and just write down the ones that really appeal to you the most. And you can pause this video and take as long as you like on this. So what I'd like you to do is really pull out maybe the top 3 that are the most important to you and try and put them in order of importance. Now, the reason this is going to give you a more abundant garden is that when you're focused on exactly why you want an edible garden, you can make those decisions accordingly. So if it's that you want to save money on food, then you can grow the foods that will save you the most money, and you can work to design your garden for maximum production. Whereas if it's that you would like that it's just as important to have an educational space and for your kids to learn about gardening, for example, or a beautiful space that you can relax in, then you will make different decisions about how you use your space. So if we're clear about this, it really helps with everything going forward. And obviously these might change over time, so it's really good to check in every year and review this. So now we've thought about why you might want an edible garden. It's also a really great activity to visualize your abundant edible space, your abundant edible garden, wherever that may be. Just take a few moments and imagine yourself going out any time of year that you like, and just imagine yourself walking out into your garden. And what do you see? What's there? Do you see vegetables? Do you see fruit? Is there things hanging down? Is there things on the walls? Maybe there's a beautiful greenhouse. It doesn't have to be realistic. This is what you would like in your wildest dreams. So maybe you can nibble a bit, a few leaves or some fruits. And really get into the feeling of this as well. So look at the colors and look at the shapes and feel, maybe something will come to you, like the feeling of picking something and then going to cook it, how that'll make you feel. And maybe if you'd like to pause the video, spend a few moments doing this, and then just write down some notes so you've got that. So I like to visualize my garden all of the time, especially in spring at the start of the season. I imagine things growing up and imagine the abundance happening. It's a very powerful exercise. So now we're going to get on to, as we progress, we're going to get onto some more practical gardening tips as well. So number 2 is another foundational thing, which is a concept which I talk about quite a lot, which is gardening in harmony with nature. So there are some real tangible benefits to this. It obviously sounds great and everyone wants to garden in harmony with nature, most people that I meet. Let's have a look at some of the benefits of that. So nature is abundant. Whenever you look at things in nature, there's an abundance of everything for everyone to share. So look at an apple tree that's full of apples, or a tomato plant full of tomatoes. How many seeds are in each tomato, and how many more plants, how many potentials are there for more fruits out of those seeds? In a healthy ecosystem, there's an abundance. Nature's also really efficient. So these systems, these natural ecological systems, have been fine-tuned over millennia to be super efficient. They're closed loop systems, so nothing's wasted, everything's used within the system, and everything's got a use, and it just works. It's like some amazing symphony of different parts that all work together to make this amazing piece of music. Nature is resilient as well. So because of the dynamism within the system and the diversity, nature is able to tweak and change. It's a bit like a tower block that's designed. Nowadays, they design the tower blocks to move in the wind, because otherwise they might fall over if they're too rigid. So nature is able to flow with the different climates and extremes of climate and extremes of conditions like rainfall, for example, and drought. And a natural system is resilient to those changes because of its dynamism and ability to change. So how can we use this in our gardens? So an example of this, this is just one example, is a forest garden. So a forest garden mimics the natural woodland. In this country, in the UK, every piece of land would like to be a woodland. That's what our land wants to be. If, you know, the country was completely covered in woodland many hundreds of years ago until we started chopping all the trees down. So that's what it wants to be. So when we're working closer to that, it's easier to maintain. That's a really good key point to remember. And obviously with the natural woodland, there's limited usability in there for us. You know, you can make flour out of acorns. It does take quite a long time. And there's a lot of things in there that we can't eat as well. So the idea of a forest garden is it uses that natural woodland, but it makes tweaks to make it more useful for us. So we're talking fruit trees and nut trees that are edible. Then we've got a layer of fruit bushes and shrubs that we can eat, and a ground layer of plants as well. And then there's the root layer. So you're creating this whole ecosystem and that works like a closed loop system. So once it's established, it's really low maintenance. These plants are perennials. You're not having to replace them every year, and you're getting a lot of crops from the same piece of land. So forest gardens are super productive. Each plant may not be as productive as if it was on its own in full light, but taken together as a whole, the land is much more productive. So one thing to bear in mind as well is that you can create a forest garden on a really small scale. If you just have one fruit tree and you put some different layers around it, shrubs around it, and ground layer, that could be like a mini forest garden. Or obviously you can create it on a bigger scale as well. But I've heard of people even doing this within containers as well. So we're going to come on to number 3 now, which is supercharge your soil. And some of these examples are also ways that we're gardening in harmony with nature. So we're using that inspiration as well. So your soil, it's really underestimated, the importance of soil in gardening. Everyone knows that soil is important, but I think myself, when I started growing, I got distracted by plants and the edges of beds and, you know, other things, basically, because, you know, you're walking on the soil and you're not necessarily like looking at it all the time. It's easy to overlook the importance of soil. So with edibles, especially living soil, healthy living soil is a complete game changer with your growing. It's the difference between kind of little crops, maybe crops that get pests and get attacked by diseases and things like that. If you create a living soil, a really healthy, fertile soil, your plants just thrive. They don't get eaten by pests as much, and they seem to have a resilience against that, and they don't get attacked by diseases and things like that as much as they do without a fertile living soil. So how can we create this? There are three things that I want to talk about briefly today. So composting is the first one. I'm sure that many of you already compost. If you don't compost, then the time to start composting is now. I cannot emphasize that enough. Go away and set up a compost bin right now in your garden, because compost takes time to make. So you really need to do that straight away. And if your compost bin is a bit like, it's not really working that well, it's not really composting, then spend some time working out why it's not working, and spend some time really optimizing the composting that you're doing. So with standard composting, which is aerobic, this is what most people practice, where you're basically just putting your kitchen waste and all of your garden waste in a pile. We call it like browns and greens, so things that are nitrogen rich and break down quickly, like kitchen waste, peelings and things like that, can be mixed with things that are more carbon rich, like certain dead plants and more woody things that will, and dead leaves that will stop the pile becoming so putrid. Obviously, if you leave your kitchen peelings in a pile on their own, they're going to smell and they will rot down eventually, but you're not going to create as nice an environment as if you have it all mixed up. So a couple of tips. I'm going to make another video on this as well, just on composting, because it's so important. But a couple of tips is just to chop everything and mix it and layer it. And if you really want to supercharge your soil, a couple of options are to look at bokashi composting, which is a fermentation process. You can compost all of your food that way, and you do it in the bins before you add it to your normal compost. And that adds loads of microorganisms to your soil, and it's amazing for growing. I've been using it for years, and my plants grow amazingly in the bokashi compost. Another one is wormeries, and like the compost that worms make is super nutritious. And with bokashi and wormeries, you can also use the liquid that comes off as a liquid fertilizer. So those are just a couple of options to look at. The next thing I'm going to talk about is not digging. So you may have heard of the idea of not digging your soil. It's when I started doing it over 10 years ago, it was quite an unusual thing to be practicing, and people, like especially at my allotment, looked at me like I was crazy. But now the no digging has its own Gardener's Question Time and Gardener's World and things like that. So it's becoming much more mainstream because of the massive benefits that we get especially on a garden scale of not digging our soil. So what does it actually mean to not dig? So we don't have to take it too literally. So we can dig into the soil to plant things and to move soil about if we need to make new beds and things like that. But what we're not doing with no dig is turning over the soil to add air, which was a traditional method that's been used for thousands of years. And we're not doing that. So what we're doing instead is adding on compost every year. So we're not incorporating the compost, but we're adding it on top, in a layer on top. And what that does is it preserves the delicate web of microorganisms and bacteria in the soil. And it means that we have healthier plants and less weeds, because the soil, when it gets disturbed, it reacts by covering itself with weeds as a protection mechanism. So when you start no dig, you might still have a lot of weeds, but if you stick with it, then you should have less weeds coming through every year. And also the soil is amazingly resilient to different temperatures and amounts of rainfall. I've found this so significant on my allotment, because I can see people who are right next to me who dig, And when we've had flooding and loads of rain, that it just drains through our soil, whereas theirs have got like clodding and it sits on the surface. And then conversely, when we've had droughts in the summer and it's been really dry, our plants and even tiny little seedlings have survived in the soil because of the water holding capacity of the soil, whereas other people have had to water more often. So it really is a very good method. And another thing that is also really underlooked in growing, in gardening, is mulching. Mulching is the best thing, especially for perennials. So if you're looking at growing fruit trees and herbs and fruit bushes and things like that, adding on mulch. So a mulch can be an organic mulch. So a mulch is just adding something to the surface of the soil. And this is what happens in nature. So the leaves fall down, they land on the soil, they rot down. No one comes along with a leaf blower and blows them away and takes them to a big pile somewhere. That just doesn't happen. All of the nutrients are recycled within the system. And that's what we want to happen in our gardens as well, for the maximum health and abundance. So this works especially well, as I said, with perennials. So leave the leaves on your soil and collect more leaves and bring them in. If you can get wood chip, that's also really good. Local wood tree surgeons often give away wood chip. So if you can access that, you can use that on top of your soil as well. Sometimes I use mulching with vegetable growing as well, not as often as I do with perennials, but sometimes if it's an area like in my greenhouse where I don't want to have water as much, because mulching keeps in the water, it can be really useful. So quite often with vegetable growing, I'm trying to cover the soil with plants as well. So having as many plants as possible and planting quite closely, so there's no space for mulching, but actually covering with plants is another form of mulching. So going to move on to number 4. So choosing the right plants for abundance. So this is a big topic. I'm just going to give you a few pointers about this. So choosing the right plants can have a massive impact on the amount that you grow and how easy it is to grow. So annual vegetables are a bit fussy. They're a bit demanding. They want everything, basically. They want the most fertile soil. They want the most sunny area, and they need sowing every year. They need planting out, and they need looking after. So they require more time and more skills. So I'm not trying to put you off growing annual vegetables, because it is such a worthwhile pursuit. But I'm just advising that if you find that difficult, if you're a beginner and you don't have much experience doing that, then, or if you don't want to have loads of time for your garden, then limit the amount of annual vegetables that you grow. So it's better to grow a smaller space and do it really well and grow the maximum amount in that space than kind of start with a whole massive allotment and find it completely overwhelming. So the other type of plants that we can grow, edible plants, are perennials. That means they last for more than 1 year. So obviously a massive benefit of that is that you don't have to replant them every year. Some of them will die off over the winter, but they'll come back next year. So you don't have to resow them. And also they multiply themselves. So you can end up with perennials. You end up with a bit of having your own garden centre, and you can split things and dig them up and give them away to people, create more gardens, basically. The other thing about perennials is that they're a bit less fussy about their soil, and it really depends on the type, but quite a lot of them can tolerate less sun. So overall, they require less time and skills. So if you're looking for a lower maintenance garden, it's worth looking into having definitely a proportion of it to be perennials. So fruit, herbs, there's a bit more unusual perennial vegetables, things like Jerusalem artichokes, and there's perennial kales, perennial cauliflower, globe artichokes. and lots of unusual leaves, and also edible flowers as well. There's quite a few edible flowers. And in this, you could put as well in this section things that self-seed, which are not perennials, they're annuals, because they have their whole life cycle within 1 year and then produce seed. But some plants that if you introduce them to your garden, they will self-seed, and so then you don't have to sow them every year. So my favorites in this category are nasturtiums, which are edible flowers and edible leaves, and they self-seed, and they're easy to take up if you don't want them, but they're really, really tasty. And wild rocket also self-seeds everywhere. And other edible flowers like calendula, really good for self-seeding. So I was actually going to say a couple more things on plants as well. One way to fit more plants in is to grow up. So use your space, fit more plants in, grow up, grow over archways. And another thing to consider with the choice of plants is to consider what's going to have the most value for you, what's going to produce the most food in your space, and also have the most value nutritionally. So, for example, salad, you can get a lot of salad from a very small amount of space, and it's high value in terms of the money that it costs to buy salad, and and also nutritionally, when you pick it fresh from the garden, it's much higher in nutrients. So if you're growing salad, it's very high value, and you're also getting a lot. So herbs are the same. Any plants where you can just keep on picking and they keep producing leaves are really good value. So a lot of leafy crops are like that. And some crops as well that are worth considering are things that just taste really different when you grow them yourself. So tomatoes, cucumbers, like beans, things like that, and peas. Just taste so much different than when you buy them from a supermarket. Other crops that maybe don't have so much value in terms of that, I think that like longer growing things like potatoes and onions, they might not be so valuable if you're looking to really maximize your nutrition and your money saving benefits from growing. But if you want to grow something that's low maintenance, then potatoes, for example, are a really good option, because you just put them in and they just grow. So it's just worth being aware of the different types of plants before you design your decide what you're going to plant. So number 5 steps to a more abundant garden is to create a simple design. Now, I don't want this to seem overwhelming to people, but in order to maximize your space, it's really good to have a simple design. And I want to emphasize the word simple, because this really doesn't have to be a complicated exercise. It doesn't have to be like even to scale if you don't want it to be to scale. You can just keep it really simple, but it's a massive game changer in terms of how productive your garden can be. So why would you design? So grow more food by using your space in the most intelligent way. So the first thing that is the most important thing is sun. And I've seen so many gardens where people haven't thought about where the sun is and just put their vegetable beds in somewhere that's shady, and then are wondering why they're not getting so good crops. So also putting things where like you can see them, where you're going to walk past them all the time, like high maintenance crops is really a really effective thing to do. So you're really, by looking at all kind of on paper or on the computer, if you want to do it on the computer, but looking at it like a plan, you can see how to use your space in the most intelligent way. And this also means that having a design means you can use your time and your money effectively as well. Now, I really know this because before I had a design, I used to just throw money and time around just willy-nilly. I didn't have, you know, I just go to the garden centre and buy random things and have nowhere to put them, and spend a lot of time doing things which didn't really fit in, didn't really have that much impact. Like I spent, for example, when I first got an allotment, I spent ages getting wood for the edges of the beds, and we spent so many days going around finding all this wood, building all these planters, and then we realized that we hadn't put them in the right place, and it wasn't working having edges to our beds on our allotment. So we ended up 2 years later spending all this time getting rid of the edges. And so if we'd done a design in the first place, we might have avoided that, and we might have maybe spent more time on something like optimizing our compost system, which we did at a later date. So that is the benefit of having a design. And the other thing is that if you've got a design and a plan as well, you can really relax a lot more in the growing season. Things get really busy, and maybe you just have like a few minutes here and there for gardening. Maybe you just got half an hour, you want to just go out and do something. If you've got a plan, you don't have to think, oh, what do I need to do? You've just got it all written down. And that means you can just relax and be much more efficient with your time. So I'm going to go through 6 steps that I would take to create a simple design. So the first thing is creating a base map. So a base map is just a plan from above on paper, or on, if you like computers and using design on computers, then you can use SketchUp for free. So it's really helpful to go on Google Earth to do your base map. So you can just look on Google Earth, there's a measuring, if you go on there, you can like look from above and set the direction to north, and then you can actually measure the edges of your garden as well, which is really super useful. And then you can use square paper or just normal paper and draw like a scale plan. Just keep it really simple. It doesn't need to be really accurate. And put on the sun and shade. So the most important thing to put on is where is north, where is south, and which are the sunniest areas of your garden and which areas are in shade. And then number 3, write down everything that you want to include in your garden. So everything like the seating, patios, if you want to include vegetable growing, if you want to include fruit, and fruit trees and fruit bushes and herbs and things like washing line and whatever else that you can think of, compost bins. So include all that, write it all down. And then this is the fun part, number 4, is that you play around with different options. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can use tracing paper, and you can just draw over different options, draw over different layouts on top of your base map. And another way to do it is to cut out shapes of, say, planting beds or like trees, and always do trees at their maximum, like how big they're going to be when they're fully grown. And you can then use blue tack and just move them around on your design so that you can just play around with different locations. And once you've got something that you're happy with, and remember this is a work in progress, so it will always evolve, so it doesn't need to be the final but if you've got something you're fairly happy with, then what you can do is then go out into your garden and lay it out in the space, so using like string and canes or anything else that you can find around, bits of wood, chairs, whatever it is, to basically lay out where everything's going to be. And then you can live with it for a little bit, kind of walk around it, see how it feels in 3D, and that will give you a really good idea about whether things, sometimes I've done that and found that things are a bit close together, or there's spaces that I haven't used. And then finally, the most important thing is to work out a plan of action. So actually start putting together, like break it down into simple steps about how you're going to implement the design. And it's worth bearing in mind that you don't have to do everything immediately, but if you've got an overall design, like so for my garden, there's quite a lot of landscaping work and concrete that I want to remove, and that's taken me a few years. So I've got an overall design, but I'm kind of working towards it over the course of a few years. So it doesn't have to be that you do it all right now, but it really helps, because everything that you do, if you know the end point, then you can make sure that it works in harmony with that. And the other thing is to put the jobs in your calendar as well. So especially useful if you're creating a planting plan as well, is to put it all in your calendar, and then you can just go and do it at the right time. So I hope this has been helpful, and that you've got some helpful pointers. So if you've got any questions about anything, please either email me or put a question on my Facebook page. Get in contact, and I'd really love to know what you thought of the presentation and whether it was helpful, and if you've got any further questions. So if you would like to work on this with me, I've got an exciting opportunity coming up over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to be, I'm going to be running a course that is going to take you through the steps that I've talked about today, but we're going to do it together. It's going to start on the 11th of November. Let me just, yeah. So I've said here the 4th, but I think I'm going to start it on the 11th to give a bit more time to get some more people involved. So it's going to be a 6-week course. There'll be 6 video modules that will go into similar to what I've done today, but much more in depth, to take you through the steps in order to create your design and your plan, and to really understand ecological gardening. There's going to be 6 1.5-hour mentoring sessions. So that's when you can come live on Zoom, and you can bring in your plans and whatever you've been working on, and we can go through it basically. And that will be, I'm going to make sure that everyone gets their questions answered. So there will also be a private Facebook group, so that you can ask questions along the way, and I'll be in there every day. And you can also post pictures and videos of what you're doing, and get inspired by other people's videos and pictures as well. So I'm going to run most of the mentoring sessions. It'll all be before Christmas, but because it's quite close to Christmas, I'm going to run one of the mentoring sessions is going to be after Christmas in January, just in case people get a bit behind because of all the run up to Christmas. It can get a bit busy, and so because I haven't run this course before, I've done a lot of designs myself, and I've worked in a lot of community gardens and design spaces and run workshops in person, but I haven't done this online before. So this is super new, and I'm really excited about it. But because it's the first time, I'm doing an introductory offer, so it's going to be only £111, which is really good value for the amount of mentoring and personal one-to-one support that you're going to get throughout this course. Because it's the first time I've run it, I'm really committed to spending loads of time getting people through this process and having this design and having the foundations in place, so that you can grow an abundant edible garden going forward. So I really hope that you can join me. If you've got any other questions about this, then just get in contact, and I'm going to send out an email which will give you a link to sign up if this is something that you want to do. Okay, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope to be seeing some of you on the course, and if not, I hope to see you on my Facebook page, and I'll carry on sending out any tips on my email list as well. Bye for now.